Well, I know when we come to church, there's always kind of an expectation or an understanding that there's certain things that we don't do, or certain things that we probably shouldn't do. And one of them is to heckle the person that is speaking. It's kind of unacceptable. So, however, today, I'm going to give you an opportunity to heckle a little bit. Don't get too excited. I'm going to set the groundwork. The only heckling that you can do are these three words. Talk is cheap. Let's have at it, people. Here we go. Say it together. Come on. Not going to be many opportunities like this again. Let's have at it. All right, perfect. So, there's going to be certain opportunities where you're going to have to be listening, where there might be great chances for you to simply say, talk is cheap. And that's going to be some ways an opportunity for us to be a soundbite for us this week, to allow us to think through some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in the coming moments. An opportunity for us to begin to hopefully put into practice and to make a greater reality as to what God, what Jesus wants us to do in the midst of every day. Talk is cheap is a great reminder that what is so important is an understanding of how we live. You know, we can say many things. We can make incredible statements. But the reality, I believe, of what it is we truly value, what it is we truly believe, what it is we truly make a priority is not found in the words we speak, but in the life that we live. How we spend our time, how we spend our resources, what we make as the most important thing. We can say all the right things, but if you don't back it up, for example, say a new person walked in here this morning, and they looked in and they looked a little uncertain about sitting down in one of the pews. And I walked up to them and I said, listen, you seem nervous. Please sit down in one of these beautifully handcrafted pews. We provide nothing but the best for your enjoyment and comfort in these pews. And then I refused to sit down. What would you say? Say all you want about the pews, but until I see you sit down, I'm not. A couple weeks ago, we were at a cottage with our family, and one of the things we did was we went canoeing. And we had two canoes. One was more stable, and the other was less stable. And the kids looked at these canoes, and they thought, yeah, I'm not sure I want to get in that one. And so as the responsible dad, I said, no. Be confident. You can get into this canoe. You might get a little bit wet, it might be a little bit tipsy, but nothing bad is going to happen to you. And then I refused to get into the canoe. What do you say? Yeah, that's what my kids were thinking. They're like, you can say all you want, Dad, until I see you sit down in this thing and make sure it doesn't sink. I'm not getting in. And of course, examples could go on and on and on from there. When I think of the message of Christ, when I think of the role of the church, one of my fears is that the greatest danger that we face as followers of Jesus is not persecution. You know, in many places in the world, you can see followers of Jesus and their lives are literally on the line. They can lose family relationships. They can lose possessions. They can lose freedom. They can even lose their lives. But that's probably not the situation for us in Canada. My concern is that the message of Jesus, the greatest danger in our society, is that of irrelevance. People are almost numb to the teachings and the ways of Jesus. Because I don't know how it happened, but some way we talk a lot about what it is that we believe, what it is that we should hold on to, our good values and priorities, but people fail to see the reality in our lives. And so what does the world often cry out when it comes to the church? And so how does that begin to become a reality for us? Psalm 16 is a great psalm. And if you've been with us this past summer, we have been working through the Psalms. And the Psalms, I believe, are basically people's authentic personal prayers, conversations with God. And one of the things that we have been doing is looking at the prayers as a model, as an example, so that we can get beyond the small talk with God and begin to see our faith grow deeper with Him. But Psalm 16 is one of those dangerous psalms. Because we can read these words, we can recite it, we can share it to others. If we can cry out hallelujah after these words, but we have to stop and ask the question: is it becoming a reality in my life? Psalm 16 is described as being a psalm, a prayer of confidence, a place in which the person finds their security and their trust and their sense of identity. Just listen to how this psalm begins and ask yourself, does this resonate with me? O Lord, in you I take refuge. You are my God. Apart from you, I have no good thing. I have set you before you. I have set the Lord always before me. Because I have you at my right hand, I will not be shaken. Words that this psalmist is crying out. Words that I'm sure that we would say, yes, I agree to that. I believe in that. God, you are the most important thing in my life. But then if you're like me, you take a step back and say, is this a reality for me? Is this actually demonstrated in the choices, in the values, in the priorities, in the ways in which I spend my life? Is this true of me? Can I honestly say that apart from God, I have no good thing? The psalmist isn't saying that there aren't other good things to be enjoyed in this world, but when you compare it to your relationship with God, it's absolutely nothing. In the ancient world, there were many competing gods, many competing idols, places in which people would put their trust in. And oftentimes in the ancient world, the gods would be regional. So if you lived in a certain region, you would worship that god. It'd be similar to sports teams, right? If you lived in Vancouver, you would worship the god of the Canucks. If you lived in Toronto, unfortunately, you'd have to worship the god of the Maple Leafs. Other people would worship gods based upon what it is they needed. If you needed rain, you would worship a certain god. If you wanted fertility, you would worship a certain god. If you wanted victory over your enemies, you would worship a certain god. And this was smack dab in the reality of what ancient Israel, the followers of God, were having to deal with. Of would they have kind of this random assortment of gods that depended upon what their need was, they would kind of pull that god out and worship it and offer sacrifice to it? Or would they, as the psalmist, say, apart from you, O God, there is nothing that can compare? Now, we may look at the Old Testament and we may look at the ancient ways of the world and think, wow, that doesn't really ring true for me here today. You know, I don't have idols, in my house. We don't like sacrifice animals and have burnt offerings. We don't do kind of crazy chants around fires. One of the main themes of the Bible is the reality of how our hearts are idol factories, of how we chase after so many things to bring meaning, to bring satisfaction, to bring the things that we want in our life. And although we may not worship the god of Baal or the god of Artemis or the god of whatever other god there may be, the gods are still around. They've just changed their names. And what Psalm 16 does is it gives us a direct look into the reality of what is it that we pursue in life. What do we put our confidence, our belief, our trust truly in? Is it the gods of relationships, the gods of success or power or influence? Is it the gods of money and resources and possessions? Is it the gods of health or appearance? And the question we begin to ask ourselves is not, what would I say to that, but rather, how am I living my life? What does my life truly portray? I mean, because the writer of Psalm 16 have said all these wonderful words, but the reality would be truly seen in the life in which they lived. And he's coming to a place of saying, God, I want to make you my ultimate. I want to make you the one that I truly chase and strive after in the midst of all of life. That's really how the psalm begins. And then he takes it off in verse 4, and he makes an interesting kind of side note, something that he has noticed. And maybe we have noticed it as well in our own society. But in verse 4, he starts off the first 3 verses in saying, I am going to put my life in the camp of God. I want to follow him above everything else. And then in verse 4, it's almost like a bit of a reflection, as if he uses the words, because I notice that the sorrows of those will increase, of those who chase after other gods. It's almost a side note of saying, we can pursue many things in this world. We can put our confidence in many things. But the psalmist is saying, what I have noticed is that when we put things ahead of God, we put our confidence in those things, our sorrow only increases. And so what does that mean? And as I began to think about it more and more, I'm sure we've all found ourselves in a situation where we have put our confidence and our trust and our security in something or in someone, and that confidence has been broken. And there's a sense of sorrow, the sense of being shattered. This past spring, I experienced some of this, and perhaps some of you did as well, to greater or lesser degrees. When we put our confidence in something, and then suddenly they let us down, there is this sinking feeling. And I'm going to try to conjure up a moment that perhaps had that experience in your life. It happened back in the spring. It happened late at night, probably around 9:30, 10 o'clock. It happened for me watching it in others as I walked into Cobblestone. The Leafs were winning 4-2 in Game 7 against the Bruins with 1 minute and 30 seconds left. Even I was becoming a believer. I had like one toe on the bandwagon. I was ready to change the message on the sign. I thought after years and years and years of letting people down, surely they would come through. Then I realized it was the Maple Leafs I was watching. And we know they lost. But what was interesting was in watching the follow-up interviews and conversations afterwards of fans, of players, of management. There was this sense of loss. There was this sense as if something had been taken from them. They felt as if they had been shattered to a greater or lesser degrees. But then they probably realized, this is just a game. Another year will come, and we pull ourselves back up. Now that is on a much smaller scale. What about the bigger things in life? You see, the psalmist goes on and says, what I have learned is that the sorrows increase of those who follow after other gods, but I will not be shaken because I have the Lord at my right hand. Does that mean that as followers of God, we never experience loss? We never experience sorrow? We never experience disappointment? If that is a message that I'm giving to you here today, chances are you'll sit there politely, but then you'll walk out of here and say, that guy does not know what he is talking about. And I would agree with you. Because we know that in the midst of life, there are disappointments. There are things that can lead to sadness and a sense of grief. But what the psalm is telling us is that when the ultimate is found in God, even when the good things of this world, the good things of family, the good things of health, the good things of jobs and of resources and of finances are taken from us, yes, there'll be a sense of disappointment. Yes, absolutely, there'll be a sense of sadness. But we will not be plunged into a place of despair because the ultimate has not been taken from us. And I believe that is a key difference. The psalmist is not saying the message of God is not, do not enjoy the good things of life. Do not chase after good things in life. Do not invest in other people and in other things in this world. That is not the message of God. All God is saying is, listen, make me the number one, so that when other things will be taken from you, you will have me to turn to. You see, despair sets in when the ultimate is taken from us. When the thing that we put our ultimate security and trust and belief and build our confidence in 100% is taken from us. And that's what the psalmist is saying. I will not be shaken in the midst of life or in death. I will rest secure. My tongue will rejoice. My heart will be filled with gladness because, God, I have you at my right side. One of the opportunities that I am granted as a pastor of this church is in walking alongside people in the midst of the difficulties of life. And it is such a testimony to me as I admire people of faith here that live out this reality in their life. As I sit with people who are going through difficult times that I can't even imagine, I have never even experienced. Whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's declining health, whether it's a loss of a loved one, someone you care so deeply about, and in the midst of the sorrow and in the midst of sadness, their heart is able to be glad because they are able to rest secure in the foundation that they have laid in their faith in God. I think that is one of the best ways that we bring relevance to the message of Christ. It's to not come across as if we have everything sorted out, to not come across as if nothing affects us, that we don't feel the hurts and be battered by the bruises of this world, but in the midst of it, our witness is that we continue to trust in Christ, continue to put our confidence in Him, even when things that are so dear are taken from us. As I think about a way forward in the midst of our lives, I'm reminded of those three little words. Talk is cheap. It's absolutely right for us to believe the correct things. It's so important for us to know what it is that Jesus desires for us and wants from us. But if all we do is continue to gather more and more and more information about Him and fail to live it out in our lives, this world is going to become even more numb. The message of Jesus is going to be falling upon deaf ears because people know the message. They just want to see it lived out in people's lives in honest and authentic ways. So how do we make Psalm 16 a reality for us as a church? How do we make Psalm 16 a reality for us as individuals so that we can honestly say, apart from you, God, I have no good thing. I will seek you. I will always put you before me. I think it's found in that one verse when the psalmist says, I will seek your counsel so that my heart will instruct me at night. One thing Jesus never does is coerce, is force his way in. You notice when people came and were intrigued and interested with Jesus, he didn't suddenly say, okay, stop right there before you take another step. He just kind of rolled out a scroll that would probably go a real long distance and say, okay, here's everything you're going to need to know. Understand what it is you're getting into. Believe this, agree to this, sign on the dotted line, and now let's go. He said, come and follow me. He says, come and learn what it looks like to live life with me. Come and follow my counsel. And what begins to happen is when you begin to follow the counsel of God, although at times it may seem forced, it may seem awkward, it may seem as if it goes against what naturally you want to do, which makes sense if we're going against competing idols of this world, what begins to happen is suddenly our heart will begin to instruct us. It will begin to change us and begin to mold us into who he truly wants us to be. So it means we begin to seek his counsel, to put God before us every day. For me, what that means is I begin to follow him in the little things, so that when he asks one of the greater things of me, I'm in a position to respond. Because one of the things I realize is that to start a journey, to start a relationship, it doesn't mean you have to have it all figured out. It doesn't mean that from day one, that is the best you're going to ever be. And I think of that when I think of other significant relationships in my life. When I first got married, I didn't suddenly show up and think, okay, I have figured this all out. Maybe I did, but I didn't say it. But it's a learning process. You begin to learn and to understand what it means to be in that relationship. When Rebecca and I started having the conversation around having kids and eventually adopting kids, there was a sense of fear, there was a sense of uncertainty of, well, I don't know what's expected of me. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know if I'm going to be a good dad. Guess what I started to do? I started to act like a dad. I started to do the things that a dad should do. The same thing is with Jesus. He says, come and follow me. Come and seek my counsel. Come and begin to put into practice the things that I so desperately want for you. So how do we do that? It begins by taking first steps. As a church, we want to be committed to being a place where we don't simply learn about God, but we learn how to live life with him. So starting in the fall, we're going to be doing a new series that's going to kind of be a bit of a quick overview through the Old Testament. And there's two reasons we're going to do this. One is to kind of give us the overall picture, the overall story, the overall narrative of the Old Testament, starting in Genesis and eventually ending in the Minor Prophets, so that we understand that the Bible is not some random assortment of stories just kind of plugged in, but it tells a greater story of God's desire to live life with us. That's one of the reasons. The second reason is we're then going to plug in to specific people, specific situations where they, in good ways and in bad ways, sought the counsel of God, where they desired to live life with God. So this then becomes a practical exercise for how we live life with him. So it's not simply something we speak about, it's a life that we live. Second suggestion is to begin to have conversations with other people about what it means to live life with him. Whether it's with your family, whether it's with your friends, one of the opportunities that we want to give here at the church is through small groups. A great way to kind of gather together with other people who are maybe struggling with the same things as to how life becomes real with God, and we can have that conversation. So maybe a first step is for you to say, I'm going to be committed to being here on a Sunday morning, so that we can learn together, so that we can begin to understand where it is that God is leading and directing us. And then, of course, the most important is begin by having those conversations with God. Listen to Him through others, through the reading of the Bible. A great place to start, if you want to even hone it down even more, Matthew chapter 5 to 7. Some incredible principles where Jesus lays out, what does it look like to live life with me? If you have a shorter attention span, Luke chapter 6, he narrows it down a little bit. But there's opportunities there for me to begin to say, how do I live life with God? What does this start to look like? Create space for Him to seek His counsel. For me, and I'm going to talk more about it next week, but as a bit of a lead-in, maybe a bit of a teaser, or for me in the last number of months, the message that I have been hearing more and more from God for this church and for my own life is in the importance of creating margin. Didn't come to me clearly in one moment. It's through different conversations. It was through different readings. It was reminded of me again last night of just create margin in your life. Create margin in the church. Why? Because I think one of the gods that the church struggles with, one of the gods that I struggle with, is the idol of busyness. One of the constant comments that people make to me before they ask something of me is, sorry to interrupt, I know you're so busy. And you can eat that stuff up. As a church, one of the idols that we have to push away is the idol of being the busy church, of being the church that runs all of the programs, all of the various ministries, being busy, 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 busy. And what do? We then invite people to come into the church and be a part of the busyness of this place. And in the meantime, our communities and our neighborhoods that need us most, we're too tired to minister to. And one of the lessons that I have been learning is that what margin does, creating space in life, not only makes me healthier, but provides the necessary space to engage in the ministry that God wants for us. I wouldn't have heard that voice if I didn't begin taking some time to honestly seek the counsel of God. I'm sure we'd all agree, we'd all tick the box that we want God to be a bigger part of our life. We want to experience more and more of this abundant life. But the question is, are we going to make it a reality? Are we going to begin to take the necessary steps, which may look different for you than it does for me? But what this world needs, what our communities need, what our neighbors need, what people who don't know Jesus need, is to see relevance, to see the reality of what it is that we believe truly lived out in our life. So I encourage you, I invite you, please don't make me coerce you. Join me in this journey, week by week, as we learn to follow the counsel of God. Please stand as we sing together.